even more important than radio and music and personality, I think what we are providing is community and companionship. You know, radio has always been a companion to people, especially lonely people or people who are homebound or
people driving,
people alone in their car. It's always been a companion. Right. So that's an incredibly important part of it, and that's needed more and more now as people are getting more and more isolated all the time because of technology.
Usually when I meet artists, it's almost like one side of their brain is focused on the art and the other side is not focused on the business. In this case, like I said, you're the guy who does everything around here. Every job's going to run through you. So when you're looking at this, you have to look at it in a lot of different aspects, business-wise, how are we going to pay the rent, program-wise, what are we fulfilling our need to our customers and the people that listen to us.
Most of the music industry is going towards algorithms and streaming services, and we stick to a human community and human choice in music. And music discovery that's helped along by a human personality and a human taste. And as everything else in the music industry and in society is going in the opposite direction, that makes us stand out even more.
Because I'm telling you,
sometimes if you're right on the same mountain that the transmitter is on, then the mountain itself will shadow it.
Okay. Welcome to Bare Wires, and I'm your host, Brian Heyman, where we have unfiltered conversations for curious people. Tonight, we have a special guest. We're actually doing a remote in Jersey City at WFMU, and the head man himself is here, Ken Friedman. He's the disc jockey, musical director, station manager, cook, and bottle washer. He's been with the station for over 40 years. From a small defunct college station to an international juggernaut. WFMU is a free-form type of radio, which we'll explain in the podcast. And we're looking forward to having a long conversation on the wild journey of Ken Friedman. He's been with this station for how many years?
Forever.
Forever. Okay, yeah. I'll go with forever because that's probably the case. But I really appreciate you doing the podcast with us.
Thanks, Brian. Happy to be here.
And, Mario's, my engineer, has talked a great deal about you. So I know this is a free-form station, and we'll get into that. What I want to talk to you about to start off is, I know you're a Jersey boy. You're from New Jersey. You're born and raised here. Yep. Where were you born?
I was born in Lenox Hill Hospital in New York and then raised in Highland Park, New Jersey.
Okay.
And grew up in kind of a Mad Men environment.
Right.
Very musical household. I was a red diaper baby. My parents were both hardcore leftists. My dad came from a family of anarchists. But he was also an engineer and an inventor. So it was also kind of a scientific household as well.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yep, I have an older brother and an older sister. I was the youngest, which was great because I got a lot of freedom.
Right. No one's watching.
Yep.
So
they gave up by the time I was born.
They just less restrictive, I guess.
And and I had a great deal of freedom growing up.
And you went to school, obviously, in those areas?
Yep, I went to public school in Highland Park, New Jersey.
So let me ask you, at what point as a child did you start recognizing radio as maybe one of the things you wanted to get involved in? How did that happen? What were the circumstances that did you walk into a studio, you talk to somebody, you listen to it? What was the motivating factor to start to go in that direction?
When I was a Cub Scout, I don't know how old I was, but 9 or something, we took a field trip to the local AM station, and that kind of blew my mind.
Wow.
And then when I was a little bit older, I was a big fan of Gene Shepard, and I used to hide a transistor radio in my bed and set the alarm so I could wake up late at night, 10:15 p.m., and listen to him tell stories. And then I was also a big fan of Dan Ingram on WABC, Top 40 radio. So radio was kind of always there. in one way or another growing up. And then I was very lucky that my high school had a radio station. They had a 10-watt radio station.
Oh.
They've since given it up. But so I had the opportunity when I was around 16 years old to start doing shows on my high school radio
so
station.
this came very early to you.
Yeah.
And because I remember the transistor radios. I actually remember being on the bus coming, listening to the World Series games on the radios and stuff like that. And that's when radio was the king.
Yeah.
And it was intriguing. And then it went from AM to FM. So you're in high school. Were you a senior or junior when you got involved with it?
I was a junior when I started doing radio, 1976.
And you were DJ?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any other duties at the station to give you some kind of...
Not officially, but by the time I was a senior, I started running the station because the people who were supposed to be running it just kind of faded away. Right. So I just stepped in and started more or less running it. And I think it was when I was a senior in high school that I realized that this was what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And I chose my college based on the radio station that they had at the college.
And the name of that college?
That was University of Michigan.
Okay.
In Ann Arbor. And so I got involved in the student radio station there right away. And then also took radio and TV classes. But they had terrible equipment. This was the late 70s, and they had equipment dating back to the 1940s. And radio is a very equipment-intensive industry. So I decided my older brother gave me advice to just keep working in radio but major in something else. So I did. I just majored in English literature and writing.
Do you think that's helped you on the radio journey?
A bit. I kind of wish
writing anyway?
Yeah, I do have to do a lot of writing. Right. So that's been somewhat helpful. I think I wish I had majored in other things. But I don't regret not majoring in radio because I was just working at stations the whole time I was in college. I was working at commercial stations, commercial music stations, and news stations, and the local NPR station.
Yeah, I can't imagine a college teacher any more than you would be learning with hands-on experience every day in the station. Yeah. I mean, this is something that you grow with and you learn as you do and hands-on, even if they had a class in it, it can't be even close to being actually in a station. So you come back to New Jersey, I guess, right?
Yeah, I found out about WFMU when I was DJing in Ann Arbor.
Right.
And a couple of listeners of my student station called me up in the middle of the night one night and said, "Your show sounds just like the station at home, WFMU." And they brought me, they came down in the middle of the night and brought me some cassette tapes of WFMU. And I listened to them and I thought they were amazing.
This was another college station though, right?
Yeah, this was in Ann Arbor. But this was the first time I heard WFMU. And I didn't even realize that I had grown up in the area where you could hear it. I was listening to other college stations, but I never listened to FMU. But then when I started coming back to visit my dad, I did start tuning into FMU. Okay,
so FMU was a college station. Mm-hmm. So did you go to this college to work at this station?
No, I enrolled in a class. I as soon as I graduated, I went there, and
what's the name of the college?
Uppsala College.
Uppsala College.
Yeah, and they told me I had to take a class in order to do a show. So I enrolled in a class.
I didn't know that.
I enrolled in a class, and then I realized the same day they weren't going to ask me for proof, so I dropped the class.
Okay.
And I became a DJ, and I think I was probably the last person they ever told that to.
Okay.
Because I never told that to anybody. But yeah, so I started doing a show there, and then a year and a half after I started doing a show, the manager resigned.
Okay.
And I applied for his job, and I got it. So I became manager in '85.
Wow. Yeah. So how long were you there at the college doing it?
Well, I ended up also teaching some classes at Uppsala College while I was hired as staff to run the radio station. I ended up teaching some classes as part-time faculty, and it became obvious right away that the college was going down the tubes.
They had some financial problems.
Yeah, it became obvious that they were going down the tubes. Right. So I started preparing to become independent.
So when I'm very interested in this transition period here. You're at the college. You're the station manager, right, at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. You see the college experiencing financial trouble. It's obvious to everybody there. Teachers weren't going to get paid at a certain time, and what went through your mind? What made you think that you could take this station from a college atmosphere, which probably didn't really support you too much, but to actually outside of college, to be independent?
Well, we were already raising almost all of our money independently of the college. The college was not giving us any direct money. They were giving us some support, some non-monetary support, like free rent and things like that. But they weren't giving us any cash. So I thought that we would definitely be able to support ourselves on our own. But I was a little naive about how much these non-monetary benefits that we were getting were worth.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Where'd you house it when you actually left the college?
Well, we had already moved to an off-campus house.
Okay.
And then when the college went bankrupt, about 9 years after I started managing the station, the college went bankrupt, and it was total
95, right?
94, yeah, and it was complete liquidation. It wasn't one of these reorganization bankruptcies. It was total liquidation, and we ended up as the only occupied house on this entire campus for 40 acres, and
no one came knocking at your door and said, "What are you doing here?"
Oh, people did, yeah. They sure did.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We had a lot of problems. Those were exciting times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, we had shootouts in the backyard and carjackings on the front yard. Yeah. We were like in a bunker.
Yeah, I mean, you were isolated with being the only house on there.
Yeah, we put rebar on.
What about rent? Were you paying rent on the place?
We were paying rent
to who?
After the college went bankrupt, we were paying rent to the bankruptcy trustee.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
got it.
And then we started looking. They wanted us to buy the bankruptcy trustee wanted us to buy the house that we were in, but it was falling apart.
Right.
So we started looking for another house, and then we found this place that we're in right now, and we purchased it in '97.
And is now the format that was at the college, you just carried over? You stayed with the same format?
Yeah.
And that's called, which first, I have a freeform format?
Yeah, it's called Freeform Radio, which has been around since, in one form or another, since the 50s, but it really became a popular idea in the late 60s and early 70s. But then it faded out. In the late 60s, early 70s, there were freeform stations all over the country, most of which were commercial stations. But then when it became clear that they could actually make money, the companies that owned them gradually restricted them so that they could make more and more money. And by 75, they were almost all gone. So we're a relic.
Yeah, they were restricting the programming, or they were dictating the program for these stations?
Yeah, they took the freedom away from the DJs, and they started making the DJs all follow playlists. And then eventually the playlists got replaced by focus group playlists and national playlists, and then the DJs got replaced with national voiceover artists, as radio gradually got ruined.
Okay.
Commercial radio.
Yeah, I'm probably just around the same age you are, and I remember some of the stations, 102.7, 95 something.
Yeah, and
we used to listen to them all the time.
Yeah.
And I got into music at a very young age because I had an older brother who was a fanatic, okay? And I'll tell you the story. We lived in a small house, 6 kids, 8 people, and we had one room for each 2 of us. And we had bunk beds because there was enough room to put 2 beds in the room. But my brother, who was older, was a fanatic about it. He had like the best stereo equipment. I mean, the best, the speakers and everything. And he had, all these records. My taste in music, my early taste in music came directly from him. So he would be out late, and I would take one of his records, and I had to be so careful with it. I mean, like it was like carrying around a diamond, and I'd lay it on the turntable, and God forbid if I didn't put that needle down right where it was supposed to be, right? So one night and he would come home every night. I had to put the album exactly where it was, exactly the way it was. Everything had a lineup. Before I touched anything, I pictured it in my head. So when I put it back, it was exactly the same way. And one time something happened. I was listening to the Allman Brothers, and I went to grab the needle, and it scratched the goddamn record. I'm like, oh, fuck, dear, right? And all of a sudden, I'm in bed now. I'm on the top bunk, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good, right? Because I'm thinking, yeah, maybe it'll take 3 or 4 days before he grabs that Allman Brothers record, and then it's going to hit the fan. Hopefully I'm not here. He took out one. He took the Climax Blues. I remember like it was yesterday. Climax Blues.
Blues Band.
Yeah, he put that on. You know, he listened to a couple songs. He took it off, and wouldn't you know, the next fucking album he took was the Allman Brothers. And I'm like, oh. And as soon as it was in the beginning, as soon as it hit that scratch, he went freaking crazy. He grabbed me off the top of the bunk because he knew there was only one person that could have done it.
Yeah.
And I just said, listen, I'll get you a new one. I'll get you a new one. But
was it Fillmore East or Eat a Peach?
I think it was Fillmore East because that was and it was early. It was like I was still young and he was older than me, so probably Fillmore East. But I used to play his records all the time. But what happened was, like I said, I promised him I'd buy a new record. But really what happened during that period is I really developed my taste for music. And that carried me for years and years and years. You know, I went to all the concerts. I was still a big concert goer.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's funny those days when my kids just bought me a turntable. I still have, you know, my albums. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I remember those times, and it was where you developed your taste in music, and those were real artists back then. You know, so when I come into a place like this, I'm like, it shoots me back to, you know, when I was a teenager in college and stuff like that, because I see all these things. I'm saying, wow, man, I remember all this stuff. Yeah. You know, so that free form type of stuff just doesn't exist. How do you know, with that philosophy, it you know, without having sponsors, commercial sponsors that, you know, run ads and stuff like that, how do you survive? How do you raise money?
We beg for it. We're professional beggars, you know, like most public radio and public television. We do a pledge drive every year in March, and then we do kind of a quiet fundraiser in October. And fortunately, through the luck of the draw, you know, we have coverage of New York City and Brooklyn, so there's enough population here, you know, and enough weirdos and musicians and artists who like what we do that we're able to raise enough money to support ourselves.
So do you get any government funds at all?
We did for the last 20 years, but they were just all cut off.
Really? Recently?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just last July, every station that had been getting what's called a community service grant lost it. So we lost $200,000 a year.
You're kidding me. How do you make that margin up?
We've been making it up with listeners. Listeners have been, you know, coming to, you know, they've been responding to the call. Last October was the first time we announced what had happened, and people really came through.
Wow.
And they made up the difference.
So
whether or not they'll continue making up the difference, you know, every year, because we lost $200,000, which was an annual grant.
Right.
But for us, it's not deadly. It hurts really bad, but it's only 8% of our budget.
Wow.
But there's other stations around the country where it's 50 or 60% of their budget. So stations, not stations exactly like us programming-wise, but other public radio stations around the country are really hurting and laying people off, and some are closing.
So as the station manager, you know, you're really in a business, all right? You're trying to run a business. You're trying to keep, and, you know, I help a lot of people in business, but, you know, there's always that separation of an artist and a business.
Yeah.
You know,
I would say it's absolutely a business. It's a not-for-profit business.
Right.
But it is a business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And how do you manage the artist and the business together? That's what I'm trying to say. Usually when I meet artists, it's almost like one side of their brain is focused on the art and the other side is not focused on the business. In this case, like I said, you're the guy who does everything around here. Every job's going to run through you. So when you're looking at this, you have to look at it in a lot of different aspects, business-wise, how are we going to pay the rent, program-wise, what are we fulfilling our need to our customers and the people that listen to us?
Well, I came to it through music and art and comedy.
Right.
So those are my interests to begin with. And then I learned the business on the job. And I was saying before that I wish I had majored in other things in college. I kind of wish I had majored in business. But there's no way you could have dragged me into the business school when I was in college. I thought it was a joke, and never in a million years did I think that I would end up running a business. So I came through it through the artistic end, and then learned all the business that I had to learn on the job. So that's how it works for me, and it's taken years to learn all the business skills that I needed to know. It's taken decades to learn all that. I could have learned it all at once, but like I said, there's no way I ever.
Well, you'd be surprised. Yeah. Guys I know that I work with, young guys that went to business school. It's nice to have. It gives you a time to mature. But in practicality, unless you're in a business, unless you're in it day to day, it's really difficult to make that transfer that knowledge from college to a business.
Right.
Okay, because it's just not practical.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I just loved radio, and I loved freeform radio so much. And then when I got to FMU, I loved FMU so much, that I just buckled down and learned the business skills I needed to learn. I never, ever would have learned them if I hadn't loved radio and FMU so much.
Right. And, you did what was necessary to keep the station moving. Now, I know you have even an international listening group. How did you get all this wide range of listeners for this particular station? Did you what promoted, say, in different places, even in Europe? I think you have fans in Europe,
Yeah, we have a lot of fans in Europe.
So how do you reach them? You stream to them, or?
Yeah, we stream, and most of even though we have 4 FM radio stations that we broadcast over, most of our listeners are still listening to us on the internet. Yeah, and we were one of the first. We weren't one of the first, but we were a very early internet station. We got a very early start on the internet. We set up our website in 1993, right after the World Wide Web was formed.
Was that your idea?
Yeah, I wanted to get us on the web. It wasn't. It was an idea that other people planted in my head. But once I heard that it was going to be possible to put audio on the web, there was no stopping me.
Wow!
Because prior to that, people would tape WFMU off the air on cassettes, and they would mail it to their friends elsewhere around the country. And I was aware that there was this whole underground cassette network of people listening to FMU on cassette. And then another thing happened in the 80s where we had this incredibly creative technical genius named Brian Redman, who was working at the station, who helped invent the video phone for Bell Labs. And he set up this crazy service on the telephone where like a dozen people could listen to WFMU at once just over their telephone. And then he set up these other things where you could set up a wake-up call. You would set up a time and your phone would ring and it would be WFMU playing on your phone. And he set up these other toys, these other audio toy things like that. And this was all through his relationship with Bellcore, the research and development arm of the company that later became Verizon. And I thought it was funny and fun, and we promoted it, but I didn't take it very seriously until one day Bellcore cut it off. They cut off the service after it had been up for a year or two. And I walked into my office one day and I had dozens and dozens of complaints from listeners all over the country who had been using this weird telephone service to listen to WFMU on their speakerphone at work. They all had the same story, that they had lived in New York, they moved elsewhere, and while they were at work, they would call this number up and listen on their speakerphone.
On their speakerphone in the office.
In the office. So they're listening on their boss's dime on the phone to WFMU from San Francisco or Chicago or LA. And this was like 87, 88. This is long before the internet. And that was a real wake-up call for me. So then I learned about the internet shortly thereafter from the Whole Earth catalog, I think. And when I found out that it was going to support audio transmission, I was like, we are going to be there. And so we got a very early start on it.
So, you do so many different things. Who monitors what's actually reaching these people? Who, when I looked at your website and I looked at all your different programming, how do you know what's keeping these people here? Is it just through time and who's listening? I mean, there's so many different programs that you have, and they're drastically different. They're not just like a little bit different. They go from A to Z in almost, from one show to the other.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who monitors?
Well, nobody.
How do you know who's listening to all this?
Nobody monitors it all. I mean, we have 4 full-time channels.
Right.
So, and there's nobody that even monitors any one full-time channel all the time. But I get feedback in all sorts of different ways. I mean, I listen a lot, but I can't listen 24 hours a day to even one channel, even the main channel, WFMU proper. But I get feedback from listeners. We have this chat service that's really important to our community, where every program has a real-time chat accompanying it. Similar to Slack or Discord or something like that. Yeah. And that's become a really, really important popular feature. So I get tons of feedback from that. I get letters and emails.
Does that influence you on what programs you keep on and what programs you don't?
No, not really, because the chat community is so supportive of everybody. But it's a small factor, and there's many small factors that add up to who I keep on and who doesn't stay on. How much money people raise. Whether there's buzz around a show, that's usually based on emails and letters that I get. Because the chat community represents, I think, only maybe 10% at most of our listeners.
They're active people that are going to want their opinion known on.
Yeah, and they're people who are often at work with a keyboard in front of them. So people who are driving, and that's probably most of our listeners during drive time, are people in their cars. They're not going to be typing on a keyboard, and we rarely hear from the people who are listening in their cars. But there's just a whole bunch of factors, but mostly it's my opinion of the program. Whether they're on the upswing, they're being really creative and energetic and putting work into their show, or whether they're kind of flatlining, they're doing the same thing week after week, or whether they're going downhill.
So you have an innate ability to look at these programs and determine whether, like you said, there's enough energy in that program that's going to sustain your audience. You're familiar with your audience enough to say, listen, this is not going to work. Okay?
Yeah. And then I also, but also on top of that, on top of my opinion, it's all the feedback I get in so many different ways. The emails, the chats, the letters, the phone calls, feedback I get from the other people who work here in the building. How much money they raised during the marathon, and even more important, during the fundraising pledge drive is what I mean when I say marathon. Even more important than the amount of money they raise is the number of people who make a donation. That's a much more important metric to me.
Better metric because
so I'd rather have a program that has 500 people
making small donations than one or two making a large donation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that stands to reason. That's a better metric to look at. That's true. But I'm trying to understand how this happens because it's really foreign to me. Like I said, the radio. I just have to tell you, I've been trying to tune in this station, and where I am, I tried the 91.1 first, and I got something on Trump. Okay, it was just ranting and raving about Trump. I'm like, this can't be it. Then I figured out, okay, Hudson Valley's 90.1, so I went to 90.1, and I couldn't even wouldn't tune in.
Rockland County doesn't get that one either.
So I was like saying, I didn't, I don't stream a lot, but I'm like, I guess the only way I'm going to get this is stream it in. I said, I'm going to try to do that. But when I looked at your website, there were so many different types of programming. I don't even know how you keep track of it.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Your website's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at it go, this is a lot of information to absorb.
Yeah, in many ways, I think the app is better than the website because everything's scaled down, so it's not so intimidating. That's a real challenge for us, is the fact that we have 4 full-time channels of programming, like you say, so many totally different kinds of programs. Your 20 years of on-demand audio to listen to, that it's just completely overwhelming and intimidating. So this actually is a really big challenge for us to try to make it more accessible. But we haven't really figured out how to do that. But one thing that has brought a lot of listeners to us has been the metadata on our website. So we got a very early start streaming, and then we also got a very early start putting our DJs' playlists online. And that was incredibly helpful to us because we play so much music that hardly anybody else plays, but there are people all over the world who might care about this artist or that artist. And if they do an online search, if they're Googling an obscure artist, one of the first things that might show up is one of our playlists.
Wow.
So that brought a lot of international and national listeners to us in the 90s, especially in the late 90s, before there were so many other music streaming options.
So this freeform programming, freeform system that you have here, are you the only ones who do it, or there's a lot of stations that do this?
At this point, there's only a handful of stations that do it in the U.S., and maybe a handful in Europe.
Okay, so it does exist in other places and stuff, and they're reaching this audience, this unique audience. I have to say, it's not your typical audience. These people are looking for very unique types of stuff. For me, it would be at a certain age, jazz. All the jazz artists I would be looking for. Mm-hmm. I went through that phase, and so. It's a numbers game. You're saying, okay, we know that there's so many people out there that this niche is going to serve them. The idea here is to be everywhere, so we're going to pick up on that niche, all right? So we're going to have that audience. It may not be in the tri-state area, but we're going to have that audience to support this programming.
Right. Although most of our listeners are in the tri-state area, it's probably about 70%. Of our audience lives under the footprint of where our 4 FM signals are, and all 4 of them are in the tri-state area. So about 70% in the New Jersey, New York area, and 20% outside the New Jersey, New York area, but still in the United States. And 10% outside the United States. And the 10% that's outside the United States, it's mostly English-speaking countries, the UK, Canada, Australia, and then Western Europe and Japan. But when we look at a map of the world, we can see where our listeners are, based on streaming activity. We do have, people all over the place. It's amazing. You'll see a couple of dots, in South America. You'll see a couple of dots in Africa.
Well, the programming is so unique that it almost, it's almost customized to those people. Once they find this, they don't give it up.
Exactly.
I don't care where they are. They found their home.
Yes, exactly.
And
then sometimes they make pilgrimages to us. They really do. They do.
They want to know where it's coming from. It's so unique.
We have had people who made pilgrimages here, and then they don't tell me that they're coming, so they might not be able to get inside, and then they're all upset.
Yeah.
But we've had successful pilgrimages also.
So it seems like you have a formula that's working. Would you would have done anything different if you were to do it over again?
Oh, man. Yeah, there's certainly, I'd have to think of what I would have done differently if I, there's many things I would have done different if I had started all over again. But I can think of a few
if there was a few things that you would say to yourself, well, if I knew what I know now, I would have done this. Because there are people going to be listening to this that may say, well, this is a great idea. I'd like to do something along these lines. I'm into radio, maybe not the exact same thing. And those things are very helpful to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would have not made the mistakes that I made if I started,
join the club.
Yeah, I got waylaid a couple of times, especially by getting large grants from funders that took me and the station away from our core mission. So that's probably one of the biggest repeated mistakes that I've made is forgetting what the core mission is, which is radio programming and building a community through radio programming. But when somebody's dangling $500,000 in your face, saying that they'll give you this money if you do X, Y, and Z, which you're not already doing, it's incredibly hard to resist. So that's happened twice. And twice I've pursued really large grants, and both times regretted it.
Because they had strings attached.
Yeah, eventually regretted it because it forced me to go off into a different direction, and it took me away from focusing on the core business of what we do here.
Yeah, with the way things are going, I do this long form podcast, but it's not what the young people are looking for anymore. They're looking for something quick.
Yeah.
Snap. They have a
10 seconds.
Yeah, they have attention span of a gnat. But I didn't care, because I'm not doing this for any other reason but, to do what I'm doing.
But there are podcasts that are also very long form and are very popular.
Yes.
Joe Rogan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
3 hours long.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But so there is an audience for it, just like there's an audience for all your programming. But do you think that you can do this into the future? Is this something that you're going to be able to promote? You're going to one day want to, retire, and, somebody's going to have to step in your shoes, God forbid, because they're going to get loaded down with a bunch of stuff to do. Do you think this is something that's sustainable?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're doing better and better, actually, in recent years. And I think that really it's great because even just by sticking to our guns, the rest of the world is sort of, or part of the rest of the world is coming around to what we do. So what I mean, for example, is most of the music industry is going towards algorithms and streaming services, and we stick to a human community and human choice in music. And music discovery that's helped along by a human personality and a human taste. And as everything else in the music industry and in society is going in the opposite direction, that makes us stand out even more.
Well, I think there's a cycle. And I think people experienced what you're talking about, the quickness and the algorithms, and they're tired of that. So when they find something like this, almost kind of like a throwback to when we actually listened to radio, I think there's a comfort that goes with that.
Yeah.
They're not being fooled. They're not being tagged along. They're just getting real music from real DJs telling them. And I think there's a comfort that they draw from that. I want to talk to you about the mechanism of supporting the station. Mm-hmm. I don't fully understand how the listeners support the station. Are they during the programming? Are they asked to support the the station or they ask support this particular program? How does that work?
Yeah, twice a year we do ask them, and we ask them every possible way we can think of, through the mail, through social media, and then over the air. And in March, it's just like full out begathon, but it's also really fun. We try to do it in a way where we team up the DJs, so there's always 2 DJs on the air at one time, and there's a lot of really funny banter and interchanges on the air, and that's when we raise most of our money. That's when we raise about $2 million in 2 weeks in March, and then in October we do it in a much lower key way, but we're still focusing on asking people via email, targeted emails, based on what people have done in the past, based on, what program they've supported in the past, or what level they supported us in the past, and also social media and mail. And in the fall, in October, it varies quite a bit, actually. This year we did incredibly well, but most years we raise about $300,000 to $400,000 during the month of October.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And they're mostly small donors?
Yeah, the average donation is $75, and the average monthly donation, and that's really our bread and butter, are the people who make monthly donations.
Right. You set it up on an automatic, like everybody else. So,
right.
What's the typical monthly donation? Is
$20.
$20. So, I could call and say, here's my card, $20 every month. It really does work, because frankly, I have about 10 apps on my phone I'm paying for. I have probably don't know half of them. So, it's one of these things that just keeps repeating itself.
Well, now there's all these successful apps.
No, I know. I'm just watching it, right?
That will unsubscribe you from all the monthly services.
Yeah, those are the ones you don't want.
Yeah, that you forgot about.
Yeah. So it's really unique, and I have to tell you, I'm really surprised that you've been able to do this in such a grassroots way, that you're able to keep your identity. And like I said, in another 10 years, what do you think this is going to look like? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to change differently? If you were to say, maybe you won't be here, but let's say in 10 years, what is this station going to look like?
I hope it's not going to be that different from the way it is now. The way we are now is not that different from the way we were 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. We'll be playing all different music. It might be all different people doing it, but hopefully it's still going to be people who know how to do good radio, people who have good, funny, interesting personalities on the air, playing great music and putting it together in a really interesting, creative way. I hope that we don't, get diluted or watered down. I hope we don't start taking underwriting, which is the euphemism for advertising on non-commercial radio. I hope we don't, start doing too much video, because that's also so labor intensive that would take away from the core mission of radio. So I expect things to be kind of similar to what we're doing, but made up of all different people and made up of all different music and sound.
It sounds like you've taken this journey for this amount of time, and you've gone through these lows and these highs. What are some of the lows where you said to yourself, "Man, am I in this for the long haul?" Yeah. Am I going to be able to pull it? And it's everybody goes through them. Tell me some of those situations.
Well, we almost went bankrupt. We had such terrible financial problems for the longest time. And it's only been about 7 or 8 years ago that we've finally become healthy financially.
What was the thing that changed that?
It was about 3 or 4 different things that kind of happened at once that changed it. We had gotten deep into debt. We were in a death spiral. So we sold our parking lot to get out of debt.
Okay.
And it was sad to lose our parking lot, because you can't park around here.
You own this building?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And we used to own the lot behind us where about 20 cars could park. So we sold that, got out of debt. At the same time that we did that, I also cut a lot of money from the budget, and I eliminated one of the programs that we took on for a grant, which had become a $100,000 to $200,000 drain on us per year. That was called the Free Music Archive, which was a great project of copyright-free music. It was a copyright-free music library, but we lost a couple of key contracts, and it had become we were bleeding a lot of money on that. So I got rid of that. I laid off a bunch of full-time positions. And then at the same time as those two things, we also massively stepped up our focus on trying to get people to donate monthly. So in the course of a year or two, we went from really being on the brink of bankruptcy to finally operating in the black, and now solidly in the black every year.
Now, do all the DJs get paid?
No.
So they volunteer?
Only one of them gets paid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's a big plus.
Yes.
Yeah. And they do it for the love of it. I know people do this. They love it.
Yeah. They do it once a week. Right. So the one guy who gets paid is the only person who's on 5 days a week. That's our morning drive time guy, Clay Pigeon.
Okay. All right. So I have to tell you, I'm very impressed. I learned so much just doing some research on this. I was unaware of this totally because I had, like many people, have gone away from the radio because it just wasn't a method that I was familiar with. Matter of fact, this is my third or fourth Explorer. I don't think I've ever turned on the radio on air just until I started doing it for this particular station, turning on the radio.
Radio's not that interesting anymore. It's kind of been ruined.
I know. Yeah. I know. And like I said, you're touching a lot of people in the right places. I think there's, like I said before, I think there's a cycle that people are, they went through this, or they're going through this quick 10-second media buzz, and when they come back to something that they feel comfortable with, I think it's something that they want to hold on to. And I think you have something here unique that says to everybody, listen, it doesn't have to be 10-second AI stuff. It could be real.
Yeah. I mean, what we provide is even more important than radio and music and personality. I think what we are providing is community and companionship. Radio has always been a companion to people, especially lonely people or people who are homebound or
people driving,
people alone in their car. It's always been a companion. Right. So that's an incredibly important part of it, and that's needed more and more now as people are getting more and more isolated all the time because of technology. And then also community. We provide community, and in fact, I often think that the community that we provide is probably more important than the radio programming that we're providing. So
explain community. What you mean by community?
The community.
I think it's important that people understand that.
Yeah, I mean the community of listeners from all over the world who it's most visible on the chat, on the playlist chat, but it manifests itself in other ways as also, we do live events, not a whole lot, but we do some live events where people physically come together and meet one another. I often hear stories about people who are wearing WFMU T-shirts who meet people out in the wild, or people.
That must be unique meeting there, I'll tell you.
Or people with WFMU bumper stickers, and then people pull up to them and give them a thumbs up or honk their horn. That's happened to me many times. But people meet one another, and it's almost like a tribe. And if you're both FMU listeners, you have. There's a lot in common there. It means that you're probably a music fanatic. You're probably into really unusual music. You're probably pretty knowledgeable about music. So, it's this real affinity group.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. I could see that happening, especially, if you see somebody walking, in California with your T-shirt on and, they listen to that station. It has to be a connection that's almost so real that says, oh God, this person is on the same page with me.
Exactly.
And that's a very strong feeling when you see somebody say, wow, even more so, you talk about sports fans and stuff like that, but this is such a unique situation that they feel like, okay, there's somebody else here that's listening to the same stuff I'm listening to.
Yeah.
Maybe listening to different programs, but their philosophy is the same on the radio. end of things. So that's great. I think that's a great explanation of community. So people think community is close-knit people. They could be all over the place, but it's community on the radio.
Yeah, and when we have events, we do an annual record convention in Manhattan. And then when we do our big pledge drive in March, we get people who travel from all over the world.
How does it? What's the record?
It's called the WFMU Record Fair.
Okay. And, where does it take place?
It takes place now. We've moved around a lot to different locations, but it was in Brooklyn for a long time. Now it's back in Manhattan at the Metropolitan Pavilion. And it takes place usually the first weekend in November.
And what happens there?
Well, we broadcast live from the event.
Okay.
And then there's about 200 tables worth of vinyl and CDs.
They're selling them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then there's also other things to do. You can, there's you can get a tattoo of WFMU's logo on your arm. And bands are playing live, and there's games and all sorts of other things that go on.
That's pretty unique.
Yeah,
that's pretty unique. Well, I'm really happy I got to do this, and I'm glad you agreed to it. I really appreciate it. I think it will get out there hopefully, and people understand what you're doing, and you'll grow your community.
And we have a transmitter in Rockland County too, but it doesn't. It's not that powerful.
No, I know, because I'm telling you, I've been spending the last 3 days trying to get to the station.
I was really disappointed. It's in the middle of Harriman State Park.
Oh, right.
It's on top of a mountain up there.
Yeah. I live right there.
Yeah, not far, I think, from Lake Welch.
Yeah, and, I back up to that park. I live in Tompkins Cove, which is the next. There is no next town. The next town's Harriman State Park. So
that's at 91.9 in Rockland County.
I got to try that.
But it doesn't cover all of Rockland County, unfortunately.
I'm up on a mountain. So
our FM signals are very weak, which was another reason why I was so excited when I learned that we would be able to transmit over the internet, because we've always been held back by how weak our transmitters are. We're not like a New York station with 50,000 watts, Our New York transmitter has 15 watts.
Right.
Not 50,000. And then our main transmitter in West Orange, New Jersey is about 1,100 watts. So, it's always been very hard to pick up the FM signal, which is why we put so much emphasis on the internet when the internet became a new way of transmitting audio.
So do most of your listeners listen on the internet?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you were to break out percentage-wise, how many would be on the internet? Just ballpark.
Probably 70 or 80%.
Okay.
But it's not black and white, because people, if they're in their car, they might listen on FM.
Right.
And then when they get to work, they might put it on, on the internet. So people listen all sorts of different ways. We have 3 different apps. We have a website, and then we have 4 transmitters. So people listen all sorts of different ways. Sometimes when I'm driving to Pennsylvania, and I'm listening to a program, I'll listen at 91.1 when I leave Jersey City. And then when I get up on Route 15 in Sussex County, I switch to 90.1. And then once I get out of 90.1 range, then I put on my phone and listen on the internet. And I think that's typical. People listen whatever.
Make an effort.
Yeah, whatever way is most convenient to them based on where they are and what they have at their disposal.
You're obviously the impetus for this whole thing, and I wonder what you think about, as I'm getting older, you're getting older. Do you have somebody who would step in and carry on this in the same manner that you have? I mean, you gave it your heart and your soul, and here you are, and you've done it, and it's working, and it's it's in the black, and is there somebody out there that you would say, I'm going to entrust this to you, or you have yet to find that person?
We have yet to find the one that one person, but we do have a succession plan, and we periodically update the succession plan because things change, and but there is a succession plan, and probably when and if I get hit by a bus or retire, my job will probably be divided into 2 jobs.
Okay. Do you have a board?
Yeah, we have a really great board.
Okay.
And we talk about the succession
They're
plan.
active?
Yeah. And they're active, but not too active. They're not meddling.
Good.
Yeah.
That's how boards are supposed to be. They're not supposed to meddle.
Yeah.
I've been on enough of them.
They involve themselves in the right stuff. And,
Good.
And they were instrumental in helping us in helping me avoid bankruptcy, 8 years ago when we were really in trouble. I couldn't have done it without the board.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Listen, I just want to thank you again, taking the time to meet with me. This has been, like I said, our first remote. I was a little leery about doing remotes because we built the whole studio just for the purpose of having these at the studio.
Yeah, you have a great looking studio. I was watching your podcast.
But I'm glad I did it. I'll do it in the future again because it really worked out. We have somebody else upstate that we're thinking about going up and doing. I have a guy who's actually coming down from Maine, an artist that's coming down from Maine to be on the podcast. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
I wish you the best going forward. I'm gonna try to tune you guys in the best I can. I'm gonna work on this to make sure I get.
If you're near Harriman State Park, you might be able to get us at 91.9.
I'm telling you, I'm going through all of them before I leave.
Wow.
I'm gonna get all the stations. I'm gonna be going through each one until one comes in clearly. Because I'm telling you,
sometimes if you're right on the same mountain that the transmitter is on, then the mountain itself will shadow it.
Okay.
So that actually happens in West Orange, where people who live a mile away from the transmitter in West Orange are shadowed by the ridge that we're on. We're on the Watchung Ridge.
Okay.
Where George Washington used to watch the British troops in New Jersey. So it's this, FM broadcasting is this weird, very geographic, intensive.
Thank God for the internet, and thank God for streaming, because that's probably where most of your audience is going to be. And they make an effort then to watch it. So you have a dedicated audience, and it's great to hear. I think you'll be around for a long time, and I hope you're around doing it for a long time.
Thank you, Brian.
again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.